What is ALICE? Who is ALICE? ALICE is 40% of the population. You may be ALICE. Keep watching to learn what that means and what resources are out there to help you. I'm speaking with Ray Larsen, Senior Vice President of Strategic Impact and Community Engagement for Heart of Florida United Way, here to share about how the organization collects data to effectively support the community. What or who is ALICE?
Well, ALICE is somebody that everyone in your audience would know and perhaps are ALICE. ALICE is an acronym that stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. So by asset limited, we mean that they may not own their house, so they don't have equity. They may not have room on their credit. They might have used up their credit. So they don't have assets. There's a statistic out there, Commissioner, that in our country, only about 40% of the population don't have $400 that if they had a $400 emergency they could get to. So their assets are limited. Income constrained. Well, ALICE is employed, and oftentimes they're working more than one job. And they can't work more hours, and the work that they're doing sometimes doesn't have benefits like sick time and those kind of things, so they're income constrained and then, of course, employed. That makes up, in Orange County, almost 40% of the population. So a lot of us are in that situation, working hard, but working to make ends meet each month.
Yeah. What information does the ALICE report collect, and what have been the latest findings?
Fact is, nearly 40% of the population in Orange County are ALICE. And again, ALICE are just hardworking families, but that are struggling to make ends meet. And one of the things that it helps us to understand is that in the course of that, I used to say they were one financial crisis away from being unstable. But the truth is, it doesn't have to be a crisis. Your car needs a new battery, your car needs a repair, or a hurricane comes and you lose electricity and lose all the food in your refrigerator and have to replace it. Mm-hmm. So they're vulnerable to that, and oftentimes ALICE families find themselves sometimes having to juggle, paying the rent, paying the utilities, buying food, prescriptions, those kind of things. And so we know that they're vulnerable. They can't get to work. They can't pay the rent, and that can become a real problem. So it helps us to understand, hopefully, the types of programs and the type of resources that will help ALICE households. Now, I'll tell you, with the Hurricane Ian, we recognize that for ALICE families, they do what we ask them to do. They go out and they stock up on food and all those kind of things, but then they lose power, and the refrigerator stops, and they lose all that food, and they got to replace everything from meat to mayonnaise, everything that's in there, and that can be a huge blow. So our response was to quickly get an e-gift card into those families' hands, so that they could buy kind of the essential supplies they needed until more resources were made available to them.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully they're buying non-perishable foods for hurricanes. That's
absolutely, that would be the best thing to do. But in some of the responses we've gotten, sometimes people's medications have to be refrigerated and they lose it there, or baby supplies. We found that a number of them lost baby supplies and need to replace those. So you're right, though. That's a good hurricane tip. Non-perishables are the best thing to get.
Mm-hmm. What is the process for the data collection and analysis?
Well, it began actually up in New Jersey with researchers out of Rutgers University and the United Way there. And they developed the model of ALICE as a way to understand what's happening in their community. Well, it turned out to be so valuable that other United Ways in other states say, can we have that study done in our area? And in fact, now the entire state of Florida is covered, and there's a group of researchers who analyze the data, but also, for instance, for the state of Florida, there are 26 experts that form an advisory council to those researchers to make the report really reflect the experience here in Florida, and particularly to reflect Orange County, and Heart of Florida United Way also works with Seminole County and Osceola County. So the data is really focused on the area in which we live.
How does the report inform and improve the quality of support provided by the Florida United Way?
So, I think what it's done is help us to understand, I guess, the reasons why a family can become unstable through no fault of their own. Like I say, life happens and so certainly, we work to be supportive in sustaining those families so that, they have that $400 emergency. It doesn't lead to instability. But also, we want to offer opportunities for Alice families to have the opportunity to earn more and to be less vulnerable. So that's led to programs like at Seminole State and Valencia, which we'll be announcing soon, to help students that, the truth of the matter is oftentimes tuition's not the problem that keeps people from being able to go back to school and get a credential or something that, might raise their income. It's the non-academic things that happen in the course of their experience. So we've seen students, they go to the professor and they say, I'm not going to be able to continue. And the professor says, why? You're doing fine. And they say, well, this happened and I got to work more hours, or I've lost this job and I got to find another job, and those kind of things. And they always say, but I'm going to come back, and they mean it. But oftentimes it takes a long time to come back, or they never do. So, we've partnered with some of the schools for non-academic support. Again, your car breaks down and you can't get to school. I think that's a bet our community wants to make. Here you have this person who really against the odds got themselves into school and are doing okay academically. And it would just be a shame for them to be knocked out because something happened to their car when getting that credential or moving forward in their education could change their whole lives and help their family to be more stable.
Yeah. So Alice speaks of asset limited, which I see as income. And then there's expenses. And I know you mentioned that some of the support is helping people earn more. However, expenses are going up and we have high rates of inflation right now. How's that affecting Alice?
Hugely. Commissioner, I know you've been a champion for these families that, are paying more than what's recommended of their annual income towards rent. And then, that's been going up and utilities going up. That vulnerability that I talked about is just even more so now than ever. And a lot of these families are having to make a lot of hard decisions about, do I pay this time, or, juggling it back and forth, cutting back on not really fancy stuff, but the essentials, and having to cut back and maybe not eat as nutritious food and those kind of things. So, I think that as you well know, Commissioner, that we live in a wonderful community, but it does have its issues, and those certainly have been made harder as we've dealt with this inflation time, and people find themselves, trying to deal with those increases in costs to their living.
Yeah. What can government learn from the Alice report? What can they do in order to help Alice increase their income, lower their expenses?
Yeah, that's a great question, Commissioner. And I think there's a span of answers, both short term and long term. As we talked about, the truth of the matter is that a solution, at least, is to be more valuable to the workforce, to earn more dollars, and support for people to be able to go back to school and get that industry certification or a degree if they wanted an associate or bachelor's degree going forward. In the meantime, we've seen that help with things like financial literacy and budgeting. It'd be easier if there were more dollars coming in, but sometimes people have car loans that don't make sense for them, and they could have a cheaper car loan, or those kind of things, or could change some of their spending habits so their dollars go further. And then Commissioner, we've worked on children's issues before. The long-term answer is for every young person and child to have a great education and have the opportunity to go after their dreams and earn a good income and get benefits, so that they're not so vulnerable.
Well, earning a good income and having benefits is getting harder and harder to find in the workplace as well.
Yeah, that's really true. And so, we know that that is a burden, right? Because if you're sick, you don't get paid. If there's a storm, you don't get paid. And again, it's through no fault of your own. And I think a characteristic of Alice is that they're hardworking and really out there, doing their best. But life happens, or sometimes weather happens, and it can really knock them off kilter. And United Way, Orange County government, the nonprofit community, hopefully can offer support to get them through those tough times so that they can remain stable.
And what can nonprofits in the community do to help increase income or lower expenses for Alice?
Yeah, I think there's a number of strategies, and one of them that we haven't talked about is to help people understand and believe that they can get that credential, or they could go back to school, or they have a chance at that job. And another characteristic of our times is that employers are looking for employees, and there may be an opportunity to grow in the company you're in, or for another company. So I think the nonprofit community, everything from assistance programs to education programs, opportunities where children can be safe so parents can work, those kind of issues just become part of the safety net and support structure for our Alice families.
We have a lot of programs in government, a lot of nonprofit programs in the nonprofit community. If there was a way to just have a holistic program or coalition to help Alice, what would that look like?
Well, first let me say this, and Commissioner, as I've said a couple of times, we've worked on issues in our community, and I think that the coordination between the nonprofits in Orange County government and its leaders is very good and very fine. Part of what makes that hard sometimes is where dollars come from. And they're restricted for certain uses, and the reporting's different, and those kind of things. So I think that the most important thing, and again, I think that Orange County and the nonprofit community, and certainly feel that way about United Way in Orange County, is to be communicating, coordinating, and learning together. And the fact of the matter is, it might be good if everybody could do everything, but that's not the way it is. So understanding what this nonprofit can do, and what Orange County can do, and what United Way can do, and trying to make that as useful and easy to access for people in our community as possible. As you know, Commissioner, we have the 211 call center, which for people that don't know where to start sometimes, or how to connect with those programs. They can contact, dial 211 and contact the center and be given information about where they could go. Sometimes it's not that we in our community don't have that service, but people don't know how to find it or aren't aware of it. So, but like I say, I think we have to acknowledge that Orange County is a leader in this area, and I think really coordinates well with our nonprofit community.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Is there a way for people to learn more? Do you have a website?
Yeah, absolutely. hfuw.org, and all the information you could possibly want about Alice is there. The full reports, summaries, and I'll just let everybody know that in later in November, we'll be releasing a little sub-report about the experience of veterans, Alice veterans, that are out there as well. But yeah, if they go to the Heart of Florida United Way website, all that information is there.
Yeah, well, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Great to see you.
Great to see you too. If you're enjoying this show, please subscribe to our channel and follow our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter accounts.